can see, we got a lively group. And like I told you in the text, really good people, passionate about the game of basketball, but more important, we're passionate about being leaders and professionals. So they're excited to hear from you, Jay, and we're excited to have you. But a couple more people are coming in, okay?
Absolutely. I'm here.
Hey, Jay, do you know John Thompson over at North Carolina Wesleyan?
Very well.
Well, I won't judge you by your relationship with him, okay? By the company you keep, you know. JT, talk to me.
What's up, fellas? Jay, how are you?
Good, doing great, JT. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Appreciate you being on.
Good to be here. Good to be here. It's good to see so many familiar faces.
Hey, Jay, I let anybody in class, you know. I let anybody in the master's class. They don't have to, you know, pass the GRE. They don't have to pass the GMAT or anything like that. I let anybody in here. You know
as long as the check clears?
So long as the check clears, you know what I'm saying? Anybody can get in here, you know. Well, great. We're gonna get started because now anybody else coming in is late, you know. So we just gonna go ahead and get started. All right, hey, welcome everybody to the Living Trophies Master Zoom class. I'm always excited for these classes all week. If everyone would mute their mics, that we would greatly appreciate that. And then tonight we're going to try using the raising your hand if you have a question feature on Zoom. Since you know, we're getting better at this technology piece, so just go ahead and raise your hand. And if not, you can also text me, and then I will acknowledge your question, and then we can permit you to ask the question of Jay. And then when you do, introduce yourself first and last name, because yes, Jay, you know, Bilas knows a lot of people, but he doesn't know everybody. And you want to make sure that you distinguish yourself from all the other people here. So make sure that you introduce yourself. We have an outstanding presenter tonight here at the Living Trophy Master Zoom class. Tonight is no exception. I have known and worked with Jay Bilas for several years at several different camps, and it's been an honor. I have found him to be a multidimensional educator, speaker, a driving force in the game of basketball and in the business of college athletics. He is an announcer, he's a lawyer, he's an author of the book Toughness, and he's an advocate for student athletes' welfare and much, much more. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jay Bilas to our Living Trophies Master Zoom class, and let's have a great time tonight.
Well, first of all, thank you everybody for having me. It's an honor for me to be with you, and a number of you I've known for a long time, and I've known Kevin forever. We used to work together at those Nike Skills Academies, and it was such a pleasure to be able to watch him work and learn from him and so many of the other great coaches. And so, some of you, hell, I did your games when you were playing. That makes me feel real like Tyson Wheeler. My God, I used to do Rhode Island games in the Atlantic 10 back in the mid to late 90s, and Rhodey was legit then. It was Tyson and Cap Mobley and Luther Clay and Antonio Reynolds Dean, David Ari Babu. That was a hell of a team.
You got a great memory. Jeez.
That was a hell of a team, man. Those were great games. That was a great time to be in the Atlantic 10. And oddly enough, I mean, it's actually a good place for me to start because, you know, I think people tend to look at me now as a 56-year-old guy that's been doing this job for 25 years and look at you as coaches that, you know, you guys have been in this for a while, and that somehow this is the best it's ever been. And the honest truth is I was never happier as a broadcaster than I was when I was just climbing up doing Atlantic 10 games when I was first starting with ESPN, when Tyson was at Rhodey. It was a thrill, and I never took any of it for granted. And I spend a lot of time now trying to make sure that I don't take what I have now for granted, and the enjoyable little things. People call them little things, but they're really big things. And so I'll start off by just telling you a little story. I don't know how many years ago this was now, 5 years ago, maybe. Coach K was coaching the Olympic team. So I was out in Vegas. They had a training camp for USA Basketball, and Coach K and General Dempsey and Jerry Colangelo and I all had to go to this event on a military base near just outside of Vegas. And so Coach K had told me, "Hey, I got a team meeting at 10 o'clock, but right after the meeting, we'll hop in the car together and we'll go to this event." And so he says, meeting's going to start at 10 o'clock, whatever. So I made sure I got there early, so that in case something happened, they changed the time, whatever, I was ready to go. And when I got there, they hadn't started the meeting yet. So he said to me, "Well, come on in and sit in the back the meeting. Then as soon as it's done, we'll go." So this was the same day that Paul George got badly injured in that exhibition game at the Thomas and Mack Center. So however many years ago, that was the exact day this was, when he broke his leg in such a horrific fashion. So I'm sitting at the back of this room, and LeBron and KD and all the Darren Williams, Chris Paul, all the NBA superstars, Westbrook, you name it. Everybody's in there on this team. And so Coach K went through the day, had some stuff up that he talked about. And then at the end, as he was closing the meeting, he said, when you guys leave here and go back to your rooms, there's going to be something waiting for you. And it's going to be your USA jersey. And I want you to take that, and I want you to lay it out on the bed. And I want you to think about how fucking cool this is that we get to do this. And he started talking about, like, at one point in all of our lives, we got our first jersey, like our first Little League jersey, or our first high school varsity jersey, or the first, if you played in college, the first time you put on your college jersey, or the All-Star game. And he went through these things, because some of them didn't go to college. But, and then he said something. He said, we get to do so many really cool things that you can start to think it's routine. And he says, don't do that. And he said something that I've said to myself every day since then. He said, don't take special for granted. Don't take special for granted. And that really hit me hard. I started thinking about, when I was first starting out in broadcasting, I would have run somebody over to do the games I get to do now. And every game I do now is like the highest rated game, and it's the game of the week, or all that stuff. And when I first started out, that was what I was pining for. But at the same time, I was loving what I had the opportunity to do. Like, my league was the Atlantic 10, and so I felt like I knew that league inside and out. That was mine, and that was the most important. Those games were the most important games because they were mine. And I treated those games every bit as being every bit as important as doing the Duke Carolina game now, maybe even more so. But thinking about that, what Coach K said, like, don't take special for granted. Like, am I going into these games now kind of bitching and moaning about little things when I should be soaking up every minute of this and enjoying it? And I really think about that. It doesn't mean I don't work just as hard. I'm not just as prepared. I'm not going into it like I'm hopping on a merry-go-round. I'm not suggesting that, but I do soak it in and appreciate it for what it is. And I appreciate it in being grateful for it, but I also appreciate it in understanding it. Because unless you understand what you have, you can't really appreciate it or be grateful for it, because it's so much more diverse and delicious. There's so many aspects to it that I love. The people I work with, the job we do, and we don't get, at the end of it, you guys get feedback right away. You've got a scoreboard that tells you win or lose. We have to take a look. We don't get a win out of it. So yeah, you have to take real pride in the performance of it, because it can be subjective. So that was the way I wanted to start this out, especially after seeing Tyson there, because it reminded me of sort of the difference in it, and there shouldn't be a difference. But it's good to remind yourself of being why you're in it. And speaking of the why, and I tell this a lot. It's another sort of anecdote about something that hit me in a profound way. And I watch a lot of interview shows, for some reason, whether it's a podcast or a TV show or whatever, you can glean a lot from people who are good at what they do when they're in these interview shows. And I used to watch a show quite a bit called Inside the Actor's Studio. It was on Bravo. It still is. Saturday Night Live makes fun of it all the time because the guy that used to host the show, James Lipton, was a very interesting kind of odd character. He passed away a couple years ago. But Alec Baldwin was on, and it's a show that it's up at Columbia University. The Actor Studio has all these students that come in to learn to be actors or directors, producers, the like. And so it's an interview of a former Actor Studio student that has gone on to great fame in the profession. And so Alec Baldwin was the subject. And I honestly didn't expect that much out of it. I was watching, I thought it was very good and interesting and some good points made. And I usually take notes when I watch it. And so at the end of the show, they kind of turn the guest over to the audience, and the students get to ask questions of the interview subject. So a young student stands up and says, Mr. Baldwin, my name is Jay Bilas. I'm a third-year actor. Is it better for my acting career to start out in Los Angeles or to start out in New York? And Baldwin said something in response that I thought was really profound. He responded by asking a question. He says, well, let me ask you a question. Do you want to be an actor or do you want to be a famous actor? And then he started going over, he says, if you want to be an actor, there are plenty of places for you to act. You can act in summer stock, you can act in local theater, you can act in this and that. And, started talking about all these productions that wouldn't register with most people because it are opportunities that are outside a spotlight. But he said, but if you want to be a famous actor, that's different. He said, if you want to be a famous actor, if you want to do it in film, you go to Los Angeles, you'll have to do that. If you want to be on stage, you have to go to New York and conquer New York. And I started thinking about that with both coaching. I think it can apply to just about everything, but coaching and also my job in broadcasting. My job doesn't really change based upon the game I'm doing. Kind of like I was talking before. If I was doing St. Bonaventure versus Rhode Island, 20 years ago or 25 years ago now, like what difference does it make? I'm preparing the same way. It's the same game. It's my game. It's the same. It's the same job, the same thrill, and the same nuts and bolts of it. I'm still working with this, great people. It's just that more people watch the Duke Carolina game than watch that. So, what is it that floats my boat on that? Is it how many people watching, or is it my personal enjoyment of it, the work I put into it? The relationships weren't any different. Getting to know the A-10 coaches and players, that was just as fulfilling as getting to know the ACC coaches now or Big Ten or wherever I am. And same thing in coaching. Like, does it matter if you're coaching a Division III team or if you're coaching at the University of North Carolina right now? You're going to have more money and more eyeballs on you. There are a lot of different things that happen. But is it really fundamentally different with the relationships that you have with your players or the day-to-day, how you put your game plans together? Whether do you want to win more at one? I think it's the same. And it's a question of the approach that you have and sort of the fulfillment you get out of it. And I also saw something recently on the show Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. You can tell I've been watching too much TV lately. But there was Jerry Seinfeld and one of his subjects were talking about award shows. And I guess Seinfeld does not like to go to award shows. He doesn't like to accept awards. And he said something that really stuck with me. He said, the job is the award. I get to do this for a living. That's the award. What do I need with an Emmy or this or that? And because Seinfeld was the #1 show for all those years, and he won 1 Emmy in all those years. And he was like, it just shows it doesn't mean anything. He says the job was the award. And so I think about that a lot too, of your job, my job. That's the award, man. That's the good stuff. And it doesn't matter if you get hung up on levels. it really can detract from what makes the job fulfilling, and what makes it important, and what makes it noble. Because coaching is a noble profession. It's important. And this kind of takes me almost naturally into one of the things I wanted to really convey. We hear all the time about only 2% of players will go on to have professional careers. I don't know why that's brought up so much and why that's talked about. Sort of the idea that it's a pipe dream for a player to be a professional for most of them, because I don't think that's true, and I don't think it diminishes the experience. And let me tell you why. Because we were all involved in that 2%. We were in that group, and basketball. I'm going to assume that we're all the same in this. But basketball was everything to me when I was playing. It was everything. Doesn't mean I didn't take care of other things and didn't do my homework and didn't pay attention to important stuff, but it was everything to me. And the fact that my coaching staff treated it as everything also was really important to me. And when you think about it, it's not whether you play pro. That has nothing to do with your fulfillment in this game. Like, all of us have spent our life in this game. We've all done that. And not all of us played pro ball. So how our coaches treated us, what they taught us, what we learned from one another, the relationships that were forged were so impactful in what we've gone on to do, and what we carried forward to the next generation of players that you've coached, or that I work with broadcasting, or all those things. Our experience in the game is informed by how we were brought up in the game. And so what you're doing now with your players, I don't care how many of them go on and play after you have them. They are going to be in the game. A ton of them are going to be in the game for a long time. And many of them are going to make it their life's work, whether they coach in high school, college, professionally, whether they're an administrator in a high school, college, pro, whether they get into working maybe in broadcasting, who knows? There are all different kinds of jobs where they're going to have profound impacts on people that come up after them. And so the job you're doing in educating them about the game, about everything that goes on around it, and about, frankly, about life. And I don't mean to sound cliche in saying that, but your impact on these players is so much more profound than any other teacher they have. And I don't mean to be demeaning of their other teachers. It's just more, when it's important to you, and basketball is important to these players, that means your impact and your influence on them is going to be heightened. And I'll tell you another story. And some of you may have heard me say this before, but it's important, and it's important to me. So I apologize if you've heard me tell this story. But I grew up in Southern California, and we had a great high school team. We all grew up together in the same neighborhood. We all played basketball together from 4th grade all the way through high school. So we had played 8-9 years straight together, same team. And it's unusual even for back then in the late 70s, early 80s. And we had a number of guys went on. We had 4 guys on the team go on to play Division I basketball. And a couple played in the Pac-10 and ACC and all that stuff. And, so we were really, really good. And a few years ago, it might be 5 years ago now, my wife and I spend a good part of the summer out in Southern California because it gets so hot where we live in Charlotte. So we want to get out of there for a little while. So we go back out not far from where I grew up. And a few years ago, my high school teammates and I had a reunion. And so we all got together, guys brought their wives and had dinner, and it was really, really a neat thing. And so after the thing finished up, it was a bunch of old men talking about how great they were when they were 17 or 18. And when I was driving back, I was driving my wife back to the house we were renting in Newport Beach. And so I was kind of saying thank you to her for putting up with that. And I'm sorry you had to listen to all that crap for that long, but thanks for going. It was, fun for me. And she said, no, it was really great. And I said, well, what stood out to you? And she said, first of all, she goes, I'm really impressed with how close you guys still are. That you're all really close friends, and the bonds that we form. And the second thing she said, and all of you need therapy for what your coach did to you. And I started laughing. I said, what do you, okay, very funny. And she said, no, I'm not kidding. She said, you guys should have heard yourselves. You're all scarred from that experience. And she's right that, our high school coach was not a good guy, and he was really difficult and bordering on what people would call abusive now. Not physically, but the way he treated us. And for me and three of the other guys, we got to go on and play after that and have experiences with really good college coaches and professionally and all that. But for most of our teammates, that was their last stop in the game and in organized basketball. And it left a horrible taste in their mouths, and they're still scarred by it. And I, that made a big impact on me. Our coach has since passed away after that reunion. He was still alive at the time that went on. And the odd part is none of us thought to call him. Not one person thought, well, why don't we call? Nobody thought that, because all those years after we had left, there had been no contact. Nobody reached out from either side. And I started thinking about what a wasted opportunity for our coach, that he had guys go on to do some pretty cool things in the game. And it would have been really nice for us to have him to the Final Four, some of the different things that we've done, in our careers. But he never forged those relationships. None of us cared for him. And, I never thought about it afterwards, but I've talked to coaches about this, that, thinking about, how would you want to be remembered and talked about by your players years later? And what sort of impact do you want to have on them? And I don't mean this to sound kind of Pollyanna or something, but it really is important that what a great opportunity that was to have, for us to have had a great experience, and for our relationship with our coach to be a really good one instead of what it was. And when you start thinking about the only a small percentage of players in high school or go on to play in college, small percentage go on from college to pro. Well, doesn't that mean that for coaches that we owe them a good experience? Not so much that we owe them to prepare them for the next level. You owe them a good experience there at the very least. And so those relationships, how they're treated, doesn't mean you can't coach them hard. But I always think about Tony Dungy's book, where he talked about coaching and said you can be demanding without being demeaning. And it really sort of set up what my high school coach was. He was demeaning. And for what? To what end? It didn't make us better players, and it certainly didn't help us forge great relationships with each other. As our relationships were great before we got to high school, and they survived high school. That was really what happened, and it was a waste. It was just a waste. And I always think about that, because you can challenge players. I mean, players are different now because of the pressures they have, social media, all these things. And we can sit and lament that they're not as tough as they used to be, or all these other things. But this is the way it is. And we have to cut through that. I have a camp every summer, and we deal with players, we deal with parents. Now, we only have to deal with them for a week. You guys have them all the time. And I realize that's different. But we also run a coaches leadership program, coaches development program. And a big part of what we do is try to understand the best practices, best techniques, so that you can get the most out of your players have really good relationships with them and do it in a manner that's not gonna be a problem, because things have changed. You can't do the things you used to do. You can't say the things you used to say. But the truth is, our coaches got away with it. It doesn't mean it was the right thing. They got away with it, and nobody can get away with it anymore. And I think that's an important distinction. So how we were coached, how we were parented, all these different things. You may look back on it, and I certainly do, and have. And there's always something in the back of my head that sort of, when there's a situation arises, well, what would my coach have done? What would Coach K have done? Or or what would my high school coach have done? And then I do the opposite, stuff like that. But when you find your own voice and all that stuff, it's important that you have a standard for yourself for how you're going to address things, how you're going to behave, how you're going to handle difficulties, when you are going to raise your voice and how. And because you can whisper something incredibly inappropriate and hurtful to a player and scar that player for life, or you can scream at the top of your lungs with your veins popping out of your neck something positive that player will carry with him for the rest of his life. I remember literally everything my coach told me, everything, because it was an important interaction. It was something that was really important to me. So everything that cut into me, I can still feel it, and everything that lifted me up still does it. It still buoys me to this day, and it's no different with your players. I promise you that. So, I mean, really what I'm talking about is responsibility. What responsibility do we have? And I'm lumping myself in the we part here, but what responsibility do we have to make it a positive experience, to make sure that these players are getting the basketball education and beyond that they're going to be able to take forward and pass on to others? That you're conditioning these guys to be better coaches, better administrators, better in their whatever their job choices are, better in their community, better in their families. Those are all big interactions. A couple things, and then I'd like to open it up for questions, because I don't want to yak too long without talking about what you want to talk about. But in today's game, with what's going on in the world around us, it's not been lost on me that your responsibility in helping players understand their voice and understand that they have a responsibility, I believe, a civic responsibility, to speak out and to effect positive change. And for those of you that are on college campuses right now, a college campus is supposed to be a marketplace of ideas. And so to me, there should be no reluctance in helping players organize and have a voice, and a voice that needs to be heard, and heard beyond just wearing a t-shirt or something like that. That they need to be they need to understand the policy that affects them, and they need to understand how policy is made, and they need to understand how they can organize and affect policy. When President Obama was in office, I was part of a group that visited the Pentagon, the White House, a group of coaches and the like, and administrators, and we were showed into the Situation Room. And while we were in there, Obama's chief of staff had recounted some stories about things that happened in there. And he had said that whenever they were making decisions, and not just in the Situation Room, but decisions that affected somebody, like someone's job in the cabinet, or maybe their area, they would say they would always have them in the room. And it wasn't, he said it didn't mean the decision went their way. but it meant that they had to be in on the process. And he said something that I wrote down the moment he said it, and I think about it all the time. And it meant being in the room. He said, "Not about you, without you. Not about you, without you." And I think about that a lot with the way the college process works. Not just not just NCAA legislation, but the way your universities work, the way your program may work. Not about you, without you. Players, I think, need to have a seat at the table when decisions are being made. And it doesn't mean every decision. And I think a lot of people now with the pandemic are because some of them want college sports so badly for their own well-being. They start talking about, well, the Big Ten needs to listen to the player. Well, now they need to listen to the players. When there's lightning in the area, they don't take a poll of the players and say, "Do you guys want to stay on the field?" They say, "No, there's a dangerous condition. We're suspending play and we're going to seek shelter until it's safe to come back out and play." Well, it's the same thing. You're not asking the players, do you want to play through the pandemic when we deem it unsafe? That's a different issue. But where there are issues where player input, where it affects the players, I think there's an opportunity now to bring these players in and to help help them and socialize them and educate them so that when they rise up the ladder into perhaps your position, they're going to be in a better position to help their players, their students, the people in their charge. And I think it goes also with your job, the NABC, your league, how policy is made in whatever division you're in. You have to make your voice heard too, and on your campus. And that means networking. That means not being siloed in your basketball program. It's not good enough anymore, and it used to be, but it's not good enough anymore to just go to the NABC convention and everybody complains about what happened. That doesn't work. Right now, there's more of an opportunity to get your voice out, to get your message out, and to have a positive effect on legislation and policy. And that includes within our own, like within the coaching ranks, like how the NABC works, the voice that has in policy, because it has I think it can have a really positive effect. So, that's part of it. Your players and you, and organizing and being on top of policy issues. I've been to a lot of these summits recently in the last several years, and look, I'm in the same boat as all of you. Like I'm a good complainer, but but complaining after the fact is so limited in its value. There's got to be the ability to get in the room and affect change that way. And for the last several years, I've been on the NCAA's competition committee. And so it started out, Jim Delaney, when he was commissioner of the Big Ten, it was called the Men's Basketball Officiating Committee. And it was started as an LLC because Delaney did not want the NCAA to get a hold of it, so that all of a sudden it would be like any other NCAA committee and move at a glacial pace. And it was great to be able to work on that committee and work on things that you thought were important on the rules of the game. And so whenever you can serve and encourage your colleagues to do it, and make sure you're keeping up with those things, and your players are engaged with things that are important to them. And even if they don't think it's important to them at the time, I think today's player is smarter and more socially aware than in years past. At least that's been my take on it with the players I deal with. So I've been really impressed. I think you can be incredibly impactful on them and helping them organize and get involved. And I, like there'll never be a time when you'll regret that from your players. And I can't imagine that you would get blowback from educators, because to me, If players can't be involved and have a voice on campus where it's supposed to be a marketplace of ideas, if not there, where? To me, that's the place that you start and help educate them in that way too. I've always felt that's really important. But look, if you guys have any before we go to questions, Kevin, let me do one last thing. My cell phone number is 704-907-6871. If I can ever be of service to you, whether it's whatever it is, please don't hesitate to call me. And that goes for if there's something for your players or you, whatever it is. If I can help on a policy matter, I don't care what it is. If I can help, I'll help. So don't hesitate to call anytime. And I usually tell this to coaches, and I tell it to officials too. I give my number to officials. If you ever hear me say anything on the air that you don't think's right, let me know. Call me, text me, whatever, and doesn't matter what it is. I'm not worried about it. If there's something that somebody thinks isn't right, I'd like to know about it so I can get it right. So I'd like to ask you to do me that favor too. But whatever questions you have, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Before we begin with the questions, remember, if you have a question, use the raise your hand feature so we can recognize you. And then when you are called on to ask your question, please introduce yourself first and last name to Jay. So we're going to start off tonight. First question goes to Mike Lopez, please.
Jay, thank you so much for being here. My name is Mike Lopez. I'm the host of the Creative Coaching Podcast. A lot of some of these coaches on here, I've had them on, and just so thankful for the opportunity to be a part of this group and just understanding college coaches, high school coaches, like you do. It sounds like you really understand the dynamics of what we do overall in the coaching field. So I want to ask you, Jay, from where you sit now, the platform that you have, your why, your legacy, what you want to be said of you as far as how you've used this platform and how you plan to use it. What does that look like for you?
That's a good question, Mike. I try not to think about legacy that much because I don't think people are going to care that much after I'm out. I think they'll just turn the channel and move on to the next thing. But what I'm hopeful of is that in whatever way I can contribute, if I've been able to mentor a younger person or help with the camp that we run and the coaches leadership and development programs, or the job that I do day to day, if I can have a helpful impact where somebody can carry something positive forward to help people coming later, that's always been really important to me, because somebody helped us. We didn't climb this ladder on our own. Somebody helped us. Coaches, teachers had profound impacts on us, and we can't repay that. Like, I can't repay the teachers and coaches that helped me. There's no way I can do that. I think the best I can do to honor what I've received is to help those who've come after me, or help my colleagues that are right next to me. That's always been important to me. And that, I think that's evolved too, that when I was younger, you're trying to climb up and scratch and claw your way to, what you think success looks like. And then you realize that no, success is right here. Like, success is right under my feet. Like, getting to do this today is success. Now, where I wind up, great. And I've never thought about, well, where do I want to be in 5 years? I just want to make sure I want to be where I am now, and to concentrate on sort of the moment that I'm in, and make sure that I'm doing justice to this, and then I'll move on to the next thing. And my dad used to say all the time, if you want to get a job, do the job you have. And I always think about that. And the other thing he used to tell me, I used to have to work for him during the summer, and I think he made me work for him because he wanted me to concentrate really hard on getting a job where I could actually sit down. And the first time I worked construction for him during the summer, the first day he said, "Hey, before we start, I just want to find out from you, what task is too small for you?"
Wow.
And I got the message right away that don't bitch and moan, just do the job, like do what's asked of you. And so I think about that even now, like what task is too small for me? You know, there isn't one. I'm going to do whatever is necessary.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate that.
Next question, Jack Castleberry.
Hey, Jay, thanks for being on. First of all, let me say me and Cody Kimball had the opportunity to go to Jay's Coach Leadership Program, and it was one of the best experiences I have had in all of my time in college basketball. So if anybody gets a chance to do it, I would highly recommend it. Two-part question here. You're talking about impact. So what impact, or I guess what lesson rather, from your time with Coach K still has like the most impact for you today from your playing days? And then also, any major lesson you learned from some of the other coaches you've been around that really sticks with you from like today's NCAA coaches that you've had as well?
Yeah, Jack, those are good questions, and thank you for saying that. You and Cody were we were honored to have you guys. That was a great experience for us. That's one of the great things about that program for me is how much I learned there. I wound up taking a book full of notes during that week myself, and there's always something that really sort of inspires me that I learn, and that's really what I think keeps us going. It's not like we're all motivated. We wouldn't be able to do the jobs we do if we weren't motivated. But man, you know, when you're inspired, it sort of raises everything to a different level. At least for me, I think the lesson I took from Coach K are a couple things. One is preparation. That he was intensely prepared for everything, whether it's practice, game. A lot of thought went into everything that he did. And it was, you know, every waking moment thought, but he balanced that by preparing us to the right level where we weren't overburdened with too much information. Like we had exactly enough for us to be able to confidently perform, but not too much where we were thinking instead of reacting or acting instinctively. And that's an interesting balance to have to find. And you know, some like we didn't have really long scouting reports. We had several things that we needed to do. Like we need to take away this. We're going to double this. You know, all those things. But we didn't have the, you know, some coaches will give a team a 15-page scouting report with all these diagrams and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that's not right. Because it works, you know, and that's what I'll get to in the second part of your question, or the second question. But he really struck a very nice balance with us. And the next thing, so the preparation, and then the next thing was the mental, kind of the mental toughness of being able to move on to the next thing, no matter what happened. So whether we had a great game or a shitty game, we evaluated it, and then we moved on. And within the game, you have a tough play, move on. Now he might wear you out during a timeout or something over something, but not when the clock's ticking. You know, we got to play, man. We're not, whatever just happened, don't worry about it, move on. And you can't make the next play while you're thinking about the last play. And I can't tell you how many times I think about that during the course of a day, where something happens. All right, next play. You know, just mentally move on. You know, take yourself away from the pity party you were just in, or the celebratory mindset you were just in, and move on to the next thing. And that's a mental conditioning thing that I learned from him, and it's really been incredibly helpful for me. What I've learned from other coaches, and that's really the best part of my job, honestly, is getting to go to all these practices, these different coaches, and seeing that there's no one right way to do anything. That all these coaches are different. They have different philosophies. They have different ways of looking at the game itself, X's and O's, how they want to play. Some guys play, fast break. Some guys run motion and 5 out, and going all the way back to heck when I used to do Al Skinner's games, he ran this tight flex along the lane lines. It didn't look like he'd get anything done, and they kicked that. They were fantastic. So it doesn't matter what you run; it's how you teach it and how you execute it. And so some coaches have these philosophies about rebounding drills. And I'll give you an example. I tell this story a lot, but it was funny. I was always fascinated by rebounding because for some reason our teams, when I played at Duke, we rebounded fine, but we were never like great rebounding teams. And that always bothered me. Like I felt like we should have been a better rebounders. And we did drills, but we didn't do anything great. And so I would see Tom Izzo running the war drill, and I went and watched Kelvin Sampson's teams practice at Oklahoma a million years ago, and they ran something called the bubble drill, where they had those bubbles that you put a lid over the basket, and they played 5-on-5 like a scrimmage with the lids on, and you got a certain amount of points for rebounds, offensive rebounds, all that stuff. And they played to 10 or 12, whatever it was. And I was so juiced by that drill. I was fascinated by it. So I called a friend of mine, Mike Bray, and I said, God, I saw the best rebounding drill. I wish we would have done this when I was at Duke and all that. And Mike said, he said, I think we got a couple of those things, in a closet somewhere. I'm going to do that. So about 2 weeks later, he calls me and says, not doing the bubble drill anymore. And I said, why? And he said, and back at the time, he had Matt Carroll and David Graves, 2 outstanding shooters at Notre Dame. And he said, I'm not having Graves and Carroll practice missing shots. That's just not happening. If we don't get a couple of rebounds, those guys are going to watch the ball go through the net in practice. And it just didn't work for him. It worked for Kelvin. It didn't work for Mike. And so like it's not important how somebody else does it. It doesn't mean that can't inform you. And maybe a light bulb goes on for you that you can use. But man, your way is probably a pretty damn good way. And so trusting yourself and your instincts and believing in what you do, I think is a trait I see in a lot of coaches. Everybody likes to second guess themselves and maybe think that, hey, if I can only do it like this guy or watch this. I think you'd find that your practices are pretty damn good when you get down to it. And so I think the best coaches I see are the ones that trust themselves, trust their system, and they become experts in their own system. And they're willing to, they obviously knows what works against them and what works for other people. Doesn't mean you can't incorporate it, but I think trusting yourself is really important. It's a trait I see in a lot of the best ones.
Appreciate the insight.
Next question, Samantha Smith.
Hi, Jay. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm Sam Smith, working with VCU Sport Operations. So my question for you tonight is, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
Wow, Samantha, that's a good question. I think I would tell my younger self to pay more attention to preparing for that one day. That I think I was like a lot of young players, that I worked really hard. Like I never questioned the effort I put in. I worked really hard, but I don't think it was always focused work. And that's not like I would get to practice really early, but I think I spent too much time, honestly, waiting for practice to start rather than preparing myself to compete through practice. And so I would have spent more time like preparing myself to compete and to make practice like a fight, and to make sure I got the most out of it. I think I was pretty good at that by the time I got to be a pro. I played in Italy for a few years after college, but I think I could have gotten more out of myself in college if I would have been more focused on the everyday aspect of it. That just because you work hard work isn't enough. It sounds kind of ridiculous to say that, but it's just not enough. It's got to be focused, like intense hard work that is targeted toward being perfect, to being sound. And I didn't do that every day. Like I had really good days of practice, but it's like on the, you can gauge yourself as a player, I think, by how you perform when you don't feel well and when you don't feel like it, when you don't have it. And I think my mental preparation for practice every day could have been a lot better. And that's the thing I would tell myself, is to prepare better for today. And don't think that just because you're a hard worker, that your hard work is gonna carry the day. It's not.
Thank you.
I hope that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
Next question, Sharif.
Thanks, Coach. Sharif Hashim, Athletic Director, Susquehanna University. I appreciate you being here tonight. I appreciate you sharing your insight on what's going on with social justice, and really working to educate our own athletes. I got a little bit different of a question. You opened up with a great Coach K story. You tell great stories. We've all heard you on air telling great stories during the middle of the game. Just in terms of, that, we're in the relationship business, connecting with people, recruiting, fundraising, and that art of storytelling, that art of persuasion. Have you ever really given thought to how you frame your stories, or how you get across sharing your experiences? Is it innate? Do you just let it go? Like, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. When I was younger, my mother was very interested in me becoming kind of a cultured person that could handle himself in different situations. So, I didn't come from a family where there were diplomas on the wall. Neither one of my parents had gone to college. And so my mom was a stickler for me. She said she encouraged me. I said she made me. She made me go, like, I had to take public speaking courses when I was in school. And that got me taught by a teacher named Billy Kramer. And it turned out that he was my sort of forensics teacher, and then he was a drama teacher, and he encouraged me, made me take drama classes. And so I learned and competed in public speaking events. It was called forensics. So I would speak in extemporaneous competitions, impromptu speaking competitions, and it really taught me a lot about one, how to keep my composure through difficult circumstances, and then the other part was how to spit out a coherent sentence or maybe tell a story. So I do think that's effective. One, I think the story conveys a point if it just has a point to it. The story I started out with Coach K, the reason I tell it is because it had a profound impact on me. And I do think it's, now look, the Coach K and all the great NBA players in the room, I think tends to grab some people's attention, but I think everybody can relate to the don't take special for granted part. So if I just started out with don't take special for granted, I'm not sure that it would resonate without the meat of the story behind it. But I did have training in this, and then I had training as a lawyer too. So I was a trial lawyer for a number of years before I went completely into broadcasting. And oftentimes in dealing with a trial, what you're really doing is telling the judge or the jury a story. And so it's I think it all stems from those things, the training I had growing up in public speaking, and Mr. Kramer teaching me pitch, pause, pace, and power, and the power of a pause, and all these different things, and then being a lawyer, because they're as difficult as a lot of the things I've done. There's nothing more difficult than standing up before, you know, 3 justices at the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals having to argue a case on appeal. And so after that, when a little red light goes on the top of a camera, that doesn't bother me anymore. You know, if I could, you know, go through a Fourth Circuit appeal without soiling myself, I could do just fine in front of a camera. So that's where all that came from. And I appreciate you saying it. I do think it is effective, that when you are speaking somewhere, like in the fundraising side, you mentioned fundraising, when you're trying to get people to give money, most people give money with their hearts, not their heads. And so if you can connect with them about why they should be emotionally invested in what you're doing and what your players are doing and why it's important, I think they're more willing to be a part of it. People want to be a part of something that connects with them emotionally. And so I think that's a big part of it.
Thank you.
Next question, JB.
Hey, Coach Bill, this is Justin Brand.
Justin.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's good to have you on here. I did want to give just a quick plug for you for everybody. I met Coach Bilas after I worked his skills camp, and everything that he says about, you know, reach out to him, he'll be there for you. Those aren't just words. He's not just blowing smoke. I'll keep my story very, very short. We were in camp on the very first day, and we were going through the ELO drill. And I was looking at it, and I have this bad habit of always asking why. And I asked Coach Bilas, I said, why do we have them throwing passes from the baseline when they're running in transition? I said, when have you ever received a pass on the baseline in transition? And he said, I never thought about it. And I'll be damned if he didn't stop the drill right then and move everybody up to the sideline like I was talking to him about. And that just meant a lot to me coming in, because I was nobody coming into the camp. And for somebody of his stature to listen just says a lot about him. So the question that I had for you was, you talked about, you know, college campuses being a marketplace for ideas and helping our athletes be able to speak out and get that action. I was listening to ESPN this morning, and they were talking about LeBron and Kawhi wanting to leave. And one of the anchors said, you know, that's a great idea, but if you leave, are you just going to vacation, or are you going to leave to go do something? So I guess my question, you know, for you is, and you kind of touched on this already, us as coaches, how can we lead our athletes to take action when, you know, people like myself who have no law background and don't really understand, you know, the laws that are put into place that hold the athletes back? What is your suggestion to us as coaches to how we can better educate ourselves on those topics to lead them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, on the thing at camp that you brought up, I remember that like it was yesterday. And, you know, to me, when somebody, it doesn't matter, you know, who makes the suggestion or who points something out, right is right. And, you know, like one of the things I learned over the years is everyone you meet knows something you don't know. Everyone you meet knows something you don't know. And so, you know, the idea that, oh, okay, well, this dude, his name's on the camp, you know, this drill is sacrosanct. No, it's not. I mean, all these drills can, you know, it's amazing how many guys will say, well, we do this differently. And you go, well, that's better. Let's do it that way. You know, nobody's cornered the market on ideas in this game or in anything else. And certainly I'd be the last one in that line. On the social justice and educating your players and educating yourself, you know, you do have access to a lot of great minds on your campus. And so reaching out and developing relationships and bringing people in to talk to your players, when there is a something that happens that requires action, you can reach out to find sort of the answers. You may not have the answer, but you know to ask yourself the right questions and ask the right questions of your players, and then you know what you need to find out, and you can go out and get those answers. As to your point about Kawhi, LeBron, all that stuff, you know, with your players, your team, your program, you're not always not everybody's gonna agree, and you're not always gonna be able to come up with the exact right thing to do. But talking about it, hashing it out, learning about it, and really teaching the players rather than you tell them, here's how it is. There may be certain times when you can do that, but being able to have them ask themselves the right questions so that they can figure out sort of where they stand on something, and then ask them, all right, what happens after this, and can they articulate what their goal is, what action they're willing to take, and what happens when there's the inevitable blowback. How do they handle that? Frankly, that was something that I dealt with a fair amount when Colin Kaepernick was 4 years ago. It was really about 4 years ago this week when his sort of controversy became a national thing. And when that was going on, I was dealing with some NBA players, and talking about sort of what they were going to do. And so much of it came down to, it's not just the method or the message. It's, will the method overwhelm the message? And if it does, how can you better explain it? And so, educating players on, like, most of the players today have never heard of John Carlos and Tommy Smith. And if they have, they've heard of them as heroes. And they are. But they were heroes in 1968, but they weren't treated that way. And I think the players need to know that there are difficulties that come with taking a stand. And it doesn't mean you don't do it. It means you do. But I think everybody has to be prepared for it, and understand what they're dealing with, and understand what opposition there is, because change is not comfortable, and it shouldn't be. But to me, if somebody's got to be uncomfortable, let's let the system and those who are advocating that this system remain the same, let them be uncomfortable. Because for the life of me, I cannot figure out why white America cannot admit right now, and it's not everybody, but why white America generally cannot admit that racism is in the bricks in this country. It is in the bricks. And you tell friends of yours, hey, read The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein, or read The New Jim Crow, and tell me when equality came to be in America. When was it? Because it's never been. It's never been. And I think for you to talk about that with your players, and the best way to articulate it, not so it, like it's some sort of spoonful of sugar thing, so it's palatable for people, but what's the best way? What's the best way for us to do it as a team, or for us to do it as individuals? Because I think for years, coaches have wanted to keep social issues separate from basketball. And that's not going to work anymore. One, it's not the right thing. It's never been the right thing, but it's certainly not the right thing now. And I think these players have a platform, and if they choose to use it, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to help them as best we can to use it, and to contemplate all of the issues. And like, I was on a call a couple nights ago with that 11-player committee, I guess you call it, that Craig Robinson put together for the NABC. And I was on there with another lawyer, and we weren't telling them what to do, but we were answering whatever questions they had. And I was so impressed with how engaged the players were, and how willing they are to roll up their sleeves and get their fingernails dirty for what's right. And I can tell you, like I don't know that. I mean, just being completely frank with you, I don't know that when I was in school I would have had that sort of maturity level. So I think it's really impressive.
No, for sure. I agree with you 100%. I think, what LeBron did and Kawhi did yesterday is almost reminiscent of what Muhammad Ali did, standing up for what he believed in, rescinding his championship belt to not go to war in Vietnam and things of that nature. So I really appreciate your answer and your time.
Next question, Manny Bloom.
Hi, Jay. Thank you. Thanks for being here tonight. Manny Bloom down here at Gulliver Prep in Miami. Just wanted to, tying into what you just said, basically, but stemming more on the media side of things, obviously you being part of the media. I've never been into politics very much myself, and I've always been aware of the racial things in our world because of the way I grew up. But I just got off another call with our athletic department. We're having the same conversations. And what these guys are doing is great because we're all having the conversations now. What's going to come of it is the big question, right? How can we actually make a difference? As a person, as part of the media, what bothers me the most now is the media. So you've got both sides of the media and how they, whatever their opinion is or how they portray the situation, they make large groups of people feel that way too and make them believe that that is the case. If this happened to this guy, let's make him look like a bad guy. If this happened, let's make these people look like bad people. All around and on every side, and it confuses people, I think, when you listen to all of it. And that's a problem for me. And as a person in the media, I want to ask you, how does it affect you being part of the media, and how hard is that to not portray that message to people the wrong way, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure whether you're sounds like you're taking that beyond sports media, just to media in general,
Absolutely.
which would include news media and opinion journalism on the news side. It's a difficult issue, and for a long time, sports has been able to stay out of the political realm and just keep it about sports. And it's certainly a more comfortable ride. But that's not possible anymore, and I'm not sure it's right. It certainly wouldn't seem right now. I can't really get into in my job and my platform. I'm not going to be able to adequately address something that Tucker Carlson says or Rachel Maddow or something like that. What I do is look at it from a standpoint of reasonable. I can't reason with unreasonable. So most of what I find to be unreasonable in media, I leave alone. I don't deal with it. There are a lot of fire-breathing fools out there that there's no way you're going to convince them otherwise. So I don't get in the mud with that. What I do is when I address an issue, whether it's an issue of NCAA policy or social justice, whatever it may be, even if it's just an issue of a call on the floor or rules, whatever. There are a couple things that I think about. I think my job as a broadcaster is to say the right thing at the right time in the right tone. Right thing, right time, right tone. Now, oddly enough, the one that I get wrong most often is tone. And you can, it's amazing that, with your tone, you can convey a completely different message than what your actual words are. And so I take great care in my tone and obviously in my words. I think very hard about what I'm going to say. I try to be thoughtful and make sure that that it's understood the way I meant it. Because I'm not one of those that now there are times when I will take this stance when I know I've conveyed it correctly. I said, look, I'm responsible for what I say. I'm not responsible for what you hear or comprehend. But if somebody doesn't understand what I say, that's my fault. That's my fault. Now, if I know it's been properly understood by the overwhelming majority of people, but this one person or a small group decides they're going to take an unreasonable view of it, there's not much I can do about that. So what I do is take care of my backyard. The most influence I have is in what I say and the way I say it. The second most influence I have is on my colleagues right around me and the ones that I have access to. I'm not going to change the entire media landscape. There's no way I can do that. And I understand that. But I can have an impact on it, but especially in my backyard, my group. And oftentimes I can have an impact on colleagues of mine that when I believe that, look, I never tell a colleague, don't say that. I never do. But there are times where we're going to go on the air, and I've never really told my colleagues this, but one of the things I do is when we have a discussion before we go on the air, we have a meeting, and I think somebody, one of my colleagues has taken it into an area that I don't think they should, I hammer them in the meeting and in the discussion and sort of make them think if they go there, that's the response they're going to get on the air. And I never do, because oftentimes they'll be, they may be convinced that, well, maybe I shouldn't take it there on the air if I'm going to have this discussion. And so sometimes I'll do that, and I don't know what their techniques are to rein me in, but I do it mostly because, there are times when you don't want to see your colleague go into a spot that you think's a bad spot for him or her. And we're all adults, so I don't want to tell anybody what to say, but at the same time, you want to, if you want to help shape the discussion, there are times that you have to make people uncomfortable to make sure that everybody knows what's coming. So I do. That's a technique I use every once in a while.
Thank you so much.
Next question, Trey Bermel.
Coach Jay, thank you so much for being here. Coach Sutton, I appreciate the invite as always. One question I do have for you, Jay, it's about navigating your career. So, I mean, you talked about you've been a pro player, you have been a lawyer, you're in broadcasting. It sounds like your purpose has always been to be impactful and to serve other people. How did you go about refining that purpose into a focused career? Like, I know if your passion is to be impactful and to serve, what made you decide to take it this way and refine it into what you're doing at this point in time?
Yeah, Trey, that's a good question. I mean, I tend to look at that as all being part of the same whole. That my journey, I guess you'll call it, as a broadcaster, has not been one where like I work in a group where we're a bunch of sharks and it's all eat what you kill. We're a team. And so I feel a responsibility with younger people to help them navigate what I've already navigated. And hopefully wherever I may be going, if it's a good place, you try to make sure that you put your arm around, figuratively put your arm around your colleagues and take them with you. I've always tried to do that because people did it for me. And I'll tell you a little story. When I first started out as a lawyer, I didn't know that I was going to get into broadcasting my first few years of practicing law. I thought law was going to be my whole life. And so my very first hearing, where I was going to have to stand up in front of a judge and make an argument at a motion hearing, that was a big deal for it's like your first game or something, or your first, maybe your first practice as a head coach or something like that. So I prepared my tail off and I'm ready to go. And I get into the office at dark 30, and it's still dark out. I'm trying to prepare for this hearing I have. And I had a colleague at the time who was 1 year ahead of me at the firm named Tamara Kettner, and litigator like me. And so she came into my door jam, and I'm sitting there, kind of still preparing for the hearing, kind of over preparing. And she says, big day today, first hearing. She says, you ready to go? And I said, yeah, I think I am. And she says, that's good. And she goes, you know where to sit? And I didn't know where to sit. And she took me through the whole hearing. She said, you sit here. You're going to have to present the evidence for admission. You do that at the close of your argument, not before. All these different things that she gave me. If she hadn't done that, I would have crapped myself at that hearing because I was not prepared. I'd never been through it before. I knew the nuts and bolts of it, but I didn't know, how to practice in front of this particular judge or this particular courtroom. And so, I've always thought about that. Like that's a great teammate, who helped prepare you for something. And boy, she made it a hell of a positive experience for me. And I always remembered that, like, look out for I'm not just going through this by myself. So look out for, she had things to do that day. She had her own cases and all that. And she was mindful that I had a big hearing big for me. It wasn't big for her or anybody else, but it was big for me and probably big for my client. But I've always thought about that, in doing my job is to help the people I work with. And it is to, have a positive impact in what I'm trying to convey. And, if I'm saying something on television, I'm not just I'm not just going to a game or sitting in the studio to puff up my chest and to be more popular or to get a commercial. Like, I'm doing that to have a positive impact on the subject or on the game itself, to make sure that if I'm talking about a coach, that I'm making sure that I'm appropriately praising him or her or getting the right message out there. Those are important things. So I look at it as all part of the same whole. That I've not like been on some crusade. I just feel like it's part of my job. Similar to you guys, as all of you as coaches, like your job isn't just to win games. That's a big part of it, but there's so much more that goes into it, and it's all part of the same whole. And I hope that answers the question, if you're still awake.
Thank you.
Next question, Rob Eson.
Jay, Rob Eson, former head coach at UAB.
Oh yeah.
So Jay spoke to our team 2 years ago when you were in Birmingham. We were on a 4-game losing streak, longest in my career.
I turned it into 8.
Jay came and spoke, and we won 6 of our last 8. Finished the season actually really strong. I think I did give you some credit for that. So, hey Jay, I had a quick question for you. Briefly, what is your prediction in the next 2 to 3 years on the future of the NCAA in regards to the Power 5, a potential break off? And I know this could go, you could probably take a whole Zoom on this, but what is your overall thoughts of what is really going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years with the NCAA?
Yeah, Rob, I'm a little concerned that we're about to get into a situation where I don't think the Power 5 are necessarily going to break off, but I think we're going to see consolidation where in football, the Power 5 is only going to play the Power 5 from now on. And the pandemic's going to accelerate that, I believe. Right now, you got conferences only playing each other for obvious reasons, but the game has changed, and even fans, they don't want to watch the games that they used to pay money to watch. They want to watch the big shots play the big shots. They want to see a big game every week. And even though there's some value for teams and coaches and all that and programs to play a guarantee game, I don't see those surviving much longer. And I think that's going to extend to basketball. The thing I worry about a little bit with basketball is one of the things that I think keeps everything together right now is the fact that everybody knows where their money is coming from. And, all the TV contracts have been in place. The college football playoff is grossing billions. And then the NCAA tournament has been really stable. And the formula of, the big shots, Power 5, and the Cinderellas seems to be something everybody really enjoys and covets. But this year we're not going to have that, and it's likely, I don't know if it's a done deal, but it's likely we're not going to have a 64 team tournament this year. There'll only be 32. Well, that's the way it used to be. It used to be only 32. So does that mean for the Power 5 that they're going to say, well, wait a minute, we can make all this money ourselves? Like, well, that could happen. I still think it's unlikely, but there is some value in having a different division for these programs that are going to pay this, these ridiculous amount of money. Their budgets are so big. It's hard to keep up with. And, are we gonna see like a super division and then a regular Division I that's got, 150 teams in it or whatever, and then you have Division II, Division III? I don't know, but we're going to see some major change, and I don't think it's just because budgets are taking a hit. Like, one of the things that I've kind of told some of my friends in the college space is, be a little bit mindful that the pandemic didn't just hit college sports; it hit the whole world. And you think that your budget's not going to be hit. The airline industry's on its knees, and the restaurant industry's on its knees. Of course, college sports is going to struggle. But I do think once this is over, and it will end, that we'll be back to business as usual, because multi-billion-dollar industries don't just fold up. It'll be back to the way it was, and I don't think anybody will hesitate to get it there because of the amount of money and the fact that these schools all use college sports for institutional advancement. And by that I mean, like, the example I would use is Butler. Like in 2009, 2010, or 2010, 2011, Butler goes to the national championship game. At the time, they were Horizon League and seen as kind of the little engine that could. Boy, look at Butler. Butler is now twice the size it was then. Twice the size. It's now in the Big East, and its budget is totally different. And their coach is the head coach of the Celtics now. Everybody likes money and likes opportunity, but they've become a more selective school, and they've risen up in the U.S. News and World Report rankings, and basketball did that. And there were other factors, but basketball was the driving force. And so many of these places, a lot of you are at these places where they want to be Gonzaga. Why can't we be the next Gonzaga? Well, Gonzaga was pretty close in the 90s. In like the late 90s, Gonzaga was this close to closing their doors. Not like the basketball part. The school was going to close up shop, and then they went to the Elite Eight, got a bunch of money came in, and basketball really took off. And now Gonzaga is one of the hottest schools in the West. Institutional advancement is a big reason for college sports and the way they're run, and I just don't see that changing into the future. The use of college sports is not going to go away.
All right, the next question, Ricky.
Hey Jay, thank you so much again for a great message. I think one of the things that stood out to me is that you're pretty much saying that we're more than just basketball coaches, especially how your coach impacted you growing up. So my question for you would be, as a high school coach, I'm a head assistant for Sarge Sears, who's also on the call at Ocoee High School in Orlando. And my question is, I think so often as an AAU coach and a high school coach, we deal with kids that may not have fathers, mothers, parents, deal with hard times. Is there any advice or insight that you could provide as you growing up your career, how we could, impact these kids, to get them over the hump, to get them to have more confidence in themselves, to play the game of basketball, and also just to make it in the game of life?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are two things I would say. One is, especially on the high school level, that every member of your team, whether it be player, manager, assistant, every member of your team has to feel valued. And so while they're not always going to have the same role, they need to be considered stars in their role. Like, so they have to work to be a star in their role, but they need to be recognized as such. And it's not so much what other people outside of your program think of them, it's what you think of them. And so I think the other players, like your star players, need to be conditioned to understand what the bench players are going through, and so they can have empathy, and so they can help. Like, how can you help a teammate or a member of your team if you don't know what's going on in their lives. And you know, one thing I learned kind of the hard way, just with my own kids. You know, I've got 2 kids. They're 25 and 23. And my oldest child, growing up, was, you know, everything she touched, you know, turned to gold. I used to refer to her life as the nation's longest winning streak. And then my son was like a grinder. You know, nothing came easy to him. He would just grind his way through it. And I always worried about him, and I never worried about her. And, you know, when my daughter was overseas, study abroad, my wife and I went over to visit, and I thought there's something not right. And I didn't know what it was, but something wasn't right. And so my wife had brought it up to her, and my daughter said, "No, I'm fine." Well, a couple weeks later, 3 weeks later, she had called home, and she said, "Remember when Dad said this?" She said, "I do have a problem." And, you know, she was battling some depression and anxiety. Well, that had never occurred to me. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to deal with it. So we went through that process, and thankfully our daughter was a rock star in how she handled it. But, you know, you can't take anything for granted there either. So your players, you have to know what the hell's going on with them and be able to spot things. And, you know, your players too. Everybody has to be involved in it, because they are dealing with a different world than we were. And so that was a profound effect, and I think changed the way I look at, you know, even with my colleagues, we're all adults with our own families. You know, you keep an eye on your colleagues, make sure, hey, you know, because people go through ups and downs and things happen, and, you know, you make sure that one, people feel valued in their job and in their role, and 2, that you let them know that, you know, because we're all really good at telling people when they're screwing up, but you got to let them know that how valuable they are. And you know, Kevin Eastman, who I'm sure all of you know, would always say, "Catch them doing something right." And I think that's a big part of it, especially with younger players. You know, players can deal with not having the most playing time, or if they know that in practice, and, you know, that their ability to have an impact on the team with the way they work, or their enthusiasm, or, you know, pointing out how good the bench was in your game, whatever it may be. I'm kind of picking things out to make the point, and not very artfully, but I think that's really important, is making people feel valued for the contribution that they make, and not letting it slide.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Next question, JT.
Jay, 2 things. One, first, on your leadership program, I see it's by invitation only. I'm wondering if I could get an invite to that. If you take guys who are in a certain age bracket, but then seriously, you've talked about a lot that you learned from Coach K, and maybe some things that you've learned from your high school coach that weren't as good, but you played with some really smart, really accomplished guys. I'm wondering if there were some things, number one, that you learned from them as a teammate while you were playing, but then also things that you may have learned from them since that time.
Yeah, JT, that's good. So one would be Tommy Amaker, who was the point guard for our team, and maybe the best leader that I've ever been around, outside of Coach K. Tommy and I were teammates on the U.S. national team one summer, and I remember we had a game coming up, and we were rooming together at the time. And so one of the assistant coaches came into our room and wanted to give Tommy some notes on the point guard that he'd be guarding in our upcoming game. So whatever sentence the assistant started, Tommy finished it, and on everything. And after the coach left, I said, "Why did you do that? Were you just showing off that you had scouted the game yourself and you knew all this stuff?" And he said, "No." He says the coaching staff needs to know that I know I got this. Like I've got this. They can trust me. He says, we've known these guys for 2 weeks. They need to know I'm in control of this. And he was in control of all of it. And that made a big impact on me, sort of how prepared he was. He didn't just know what his assignment was, he knew what everybody's was. And very uplifting teammate. And the other was a guy named Mark Allery. I know, JT, you know him, but some of the people on the call may not. Mark is probably the most underrated superstar that Duke's ever had. When he left, when we left Duke, we were the same year in school. Johnny Dawkins was the all-time leading scorer at Duke, and Mark Allery was third, and played every minute with number one. And it wasn't like there were a ton of shots to go around. He's a remarkable player. And when back then, Coach K was younger, and I guess we were all younger, but Coach K was a young coach. He's in his 30s, and he could be pretty hard on us in film sessions. And at the end of it, you end of a film session sometimes, you'd leave there going, God, do I have bruises on me after that? And Allery, I remember Allery saying one time, I mentioned to him, I said, man, that was a tough film session. And he said, I didn't watch it. And I said, what do you mean you didn't watch it? And he said, I looked at my feet the whole time. And I said, he says when he, and I couldn't believe he said that. And he says, when we have a film session, when we're doing stuff about, hey, here's the positioning we need to get better. Here's what we need to do to get better. He says, that was just us getting our ass kicked and beaten up. And he goes, that's not going into my memory bank. And he says, I need to call on that. I need to call on a positive memory bank when we're playing. And he says, when it's hitting the fan, I'm not letting somebody plant bad memories in my memory bank. That's not going to happen. I'm not allowing that. And I really thought about that a lot, going, man, that's pretty profound. I sat there and just took every punch. And he's like, nope, I'm not doing it. And it wasn't a disrespectful thing. It was like, this is what I rely on. And he was a really tough competitor. And that was impressive to me, the way he approached things like that, his mental approach to the game was really, really strong. And that was a part of it. I don't know that I would recommend that to players, but I certainly would. I certainly have brought it up a lot when people ask, sort of the idea of what is film for? It's to get better. But you certainly don't want to plant negativity in your players' minds, so that because I think there's a balance between a player going out to do something positive and then being afraid to make a mistake. Like you don't want your players afraid to make a mistake, because man, I've played like that, and it's debilitating. Because then you're not going to be as positive in going after something if you're worried about making a mistake. We're all going to make a mistake. So what? You want to play without regard to that. And certainly, so how you handle your film sessions, how you handle feedback with players, doesn't mean, everything's got to be seashells and balloons like Al McGuire used to say. But be mindful of what are you planting in your players' memory banks that they're going to draw upon later, and do you want them drawing a negative experience?
All right, next question, Ben Rogers.
Coach, thank you. I really appreciate it. Jay, this is awesome. I appreciate your time spent with everybody. My name is Ben Rogers. I run TBL Coaching. It's a leadership and accountability coaching service for leaders and teams in both business and sports. One of the things that we talk about frequently is making the intangible tangible. And your book, Toughness, is one of my favorite books I've ever read. I really appreciate all the work you put into that. One of my favorite lines that you mentioned there is that toughness is contagious. Obviously, we all want to be tougher, and we want teammates that are tougher and employees that are tougher and all those things. But I was curious if you could describe maybe some tangible examples of how you teach toughness, and maybe if you give an immediate action somebody could put in place their team, that would be awesome. And then just kind of a fun question to end with is I'm very curious about your rap lyrics on your Twitter every morning.
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment on the toughness part, or the toughness book. That actually just came from an article that I wrote. I was watching a game, just like we all do on a Saturday, and a colleague of mine was talking about a player that was just being a bully about how tough he was. I was like, that guy's not tough. That's not what toughness is. And I was motivated to write this article, and I wrote it, and I couldn't believe, like, ESPN didn't ask me to write it. I just kind of submitted it to him, said, if you can use it, great. If not, I was just kind of moved to write this. And it got a response that I couldn't believe. I mean, it was literally, I got response from all over the world, from people in different walks, whether they were military, teachers, professors, NASA engineers, obviously coaches, and coaches from all different kind of sports. It was really moving. So I wound up writing the book and researching it. To me, toughness is about values. It's what do you value? And to me, like, my definition of it for a player was a tough player is one that's easy to play with and hard to play against. If you boiled it down to its essence, I mean, the toughest guys I played against were not the best players. I think I put in the book, like, the toughest guy I ever played against, a guy named John Ebeling, who I played against in Italy, and he just made everything I tried to do incredibly hard. I hated playing against him. And at the end of it, I was kind of going, well, isn't that what you want? Like, you want to make it to where nobody wants to play against you, or at least they wouldn't put their hand up to guard you, or have to play against you as a counterpart. On how to instill it, I still think putting players into difficult situations and having them figure their way out is important. Like, having practices where, like, I can't tell you how often I see this, where I go to a practice and all the energy at a practice is coming from the coaching staff, and then they wonder why in a game their team doesn't talk, and their team doesn't react, and their team doesn't communicate. And you're going, well, you guys do it all for them in practice. And like, sometimes it's better not to say anything in practice and have a silent practice where you don't say anything, and be able to point it out to them that if you're the ones bringing the energy all the time, and you're the ones bringing the communication all the time, and you're the one talking on defense all the time when you're in practice, you're not going to be able to do that in the game. And that's when it's going to be exposed. And then you're going to wonder why your team doesn't communicate. Things like that, where you put them in stressful situations there where they can learn. And, I mean, Coach K did that with us all the time. Game situations, to where we were put in a position to fail and learn from it that way. And there were times where there were fights and difficult things that came from it, but those were for the most part positive. They were positive fights. I don't know that it's necessarily a drill or anything like that. It's just sort of a mindset that you have of we're going to live in difficulty. I remember Bob Knight used to talk all the time about the best sequences he used to have in practice were 5-on-4, and where you had or 4-on-3 or whatever it is, where figure it out. And he could always make a point to the team that had 5, saying, you couldn't score against 4 guys, and the team against 4, you got to figure it out. And putting players in a position where they have to figure it out without excuses is really, I think, really important. And I believe this is true, that most people naturally are rationalizers or excuse makers. I know I am. I'm not anymore, but I used to be. So I think, and that's part of it too, is having the wherewithal to be able to self-evaluate, to be able to take criticism and realize it's not the end of the world, and you can pick yourself up and be better from it. That your criticism isn't to hurt anybody's feelings. It's so that you can act upon it, and it's like grading a math problem or something. You're trying to figure it out so that you can do it better the next time, and that's all it is. And so your corrections aren't meant to hurt anyone's feelings. And if somebody takes it like that, you kind of got to toughen up and use it to your advantage.
Thank you.
Next question, Charnel.
Hey, Jay. Thank you. This is Charnay Zoll-Norman, assistant women's basketball coach at URI. So first, I want to thank you for being here tonight. It's pretty cool to have you on. And thank you also for your book. It helped me as a pro player and now helping me as a coach to be better. So in your book, you use trust as one of your pillars for toughness. How do you see the game changing coming from a program like Duke, which is one of the best like team ball, and you're an expert in the college game as well as a lawyer? How do you see the game changing with the NIL and having players trust each other, trust in one another, and play together on the court?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't really see NIL as being an impediment to teams being close or trusting one another. Just like I don't see in other sports outside of men's and women's basketball, the idea in most other sports, the whole team doesn't get scholarships. So you have some that are scholarship, you have others that aren't, and they seem to get along just fine. You don't play. I mean, I talk to coaches about this all the time. Like, you guys don't play your players the same amount of minutes just so everybody gets along. I think more than anything, players understand meritocracy, and they understand that what you have has been earned, and playing time is earned. You guys aren't giving it out, and that's why, like, I've always pushed back a little bit on coaches who say, well, I have to sell my players on this, or we got to sell this, or they got to get buy-in. No, you don't. What you have is not for sale. Nobody can buy it. It cannot be bought. You are not selling anything. Like, it's earned, and it's earned through achievement. So there's equity involved in what you have, and playing time is earned. It is not bought. It is not given, and trust is earned. And that's not given either. You can't sell all that. The players can't buy it. I know it's a semantic thing, but I think it's an important distinction for me, anyways. So I don't see that as being a problem. It's the same thing about like attention. Like, some of your players are going to get way more attention than others, but so what? Like, are we in this for attention? Or are we in this because we want to band together and do something special together? Because at the end of it, like sort of that. And I'm older now, so maybe my perspective is changed over the years. But that reunion I told you about, none of us brought our trophies with us, and nobody brought like our stat sheets and all that stuff. We were just a group of people that had a shared experience, and none of us were looking at one another going, okay, well, I was the star and you were at the end of the bench. Some of the guys that didn't play were our most valued teammates and most valued friends. And that has nothing to do with how close your team is, and the team dynamic of all that, of trust and being resilient and all those things. I don't think that enters into it. Just like with your staff, the fact that one is a head coach and makes more money, and the grad assistant doesn't make as much or whatever, that shouldn't be a determining factor in how you treat one another and the trust that you have as a staff. It's sort of the idea of do your job and help a teammate do his or her job to the best of your ability. And if that's the value system, I think the rest of it doesn't matter as much. Maybe I'm being naive about that, but we don't. I don't ever remember spending a whole lot of time worrying about what somebody else was getting or making. I was just worried about doing what I needed to do and to make us better. And our coaches fostered that. So it was a top-down thing.
Thank you very much.
Next question, Eric Skeeters.
Hey, Jay, Eric Skeeters, head men's basketball coach at Delaware State. Really, really appreciate you being on and your candidness and your truth and honesty. And also appreciate you giving out your number, because I give you comments to the screen. So I'm going to send some comments now to you, text to you. And that approach you have, I'm sure probably works in those meetings before you go on the air with Seth Greenberg, having worked for him at Virginia Tech. So I know they work well. And we all in college basketball appreciate that. My question, because you've seen probably, I recognize as the most successful program in college basketball at a lot of different levels. So you came in at Duke and the Virginia game where Coach K left the score from the ACC tournament, right, on the scoreboard all summer long, to playing for a national championship as a senior, to being assistant coach with Coach, and I think you won with that national championship team as an assistant with Christian Laettner and that crew, to now being the voice of college basketball. And as a coach, and I'm only in my second year as a head coach, going into my third year, but been coaching since '92. What, and is it one thing or three things, what did Coach K, from playing for him, working for him, and now analyzing college basketball, what has he gotten better at? What is Coach K, when you say, okay, when I played for him, he was this way, and the adjustments, because he's very innovative, and his teams and style of play, what can you say along the way? Because his record in the first couple of years, we get fired, right? At Coach K in the first 3 years at Duke, he's not going to still be at Duke in 2020 with those first couple of years. What has he gotten better at? Or if we're really good at it, what has he gotten better at from then till now? For myself and for all of us on here.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So he's gotten much better. I think if he were here, he would probably agree. He's gotten he's better at everything, but he's gotten much better at delegating. When I played for him, he did everything, and it was almost like he wouldn't delegate something because he wanted to make sure it was done the way he wanted it done. So I think that actually kind of led to him getting exhausted in the mid-90s because he was trying to do everything. And he rarely said the word no when somebody would ask for something. And he learned after winning the two national championships in 91 and 92, and he became like coveted for this, that, and the other. He tried to be all things to all people and realized that he couldn't do that anymore. So delegating, I would say, not only delegating to his assistants, and then being able to take a step back to watch the whole instead of being immersed in just the one part of it. That was, I think, very helpful to him. And the other was the method. Like, he's always adapted his method of communicating. He was pretty rough with us, and pretty hard on us. Not in a bad way. It was great, but I think his message is different now because it's received in a different way. He could, because our coaches before we got to college had been pretty hard on us. That was kind of the method back then. Coaches were just rougher, man. Your feelings as a player didn't really enter into it very much. But now, you could have guys that retreat into a shell. And like I remember when Tommy Amaker was a head coach at Michigan, I had a game there. It was Michigan Georgetown in Ann Arbor, and so I'm watching a practice, and he brings a team in, and they have film session, and so they're going over clips, and they're all clips from other teams, like NBA stuff, other college teams, and he's making the point, like, here's where this team messed this up, and the better way to do it is this, and whatever. And afterwards, I said, well, I asked him, I go, why did you show all these other teams? Like, that was stuff you were trying to get across that your team was doing. He goes, if I showed us doing, a couple of those guys would be like turtles. They'd put their head in their shell and never come out. He said, I have to show other people screwing up and point it out when they do it, so it gets into some of our guys. But Coach K did this thing one time I don't remember the year. So Mason Plumlee was a freshman. And I just happened to be there doing a game, and I'm there the day before, and we're going to, I'm at practice. And then he says they're going to go in for film, and he goes, if you want to come in, sit in the back, we're going to do film. And so I never say no to anybody that lets me in. I want to watch whatever I can see. So I'm sitting in the back, and I can tell, man, I've been through those film sessions with him, and watching Plumlee on film, I'm going, all right, he's about to get it. And I started having like these Vietnam flashbacks, PTSD. And he stops the video, and it's up on, big old screen up on the wall. And he says, Mason, and he goes, I've never had a good player do this. I've never had a good player do this. And he says, I think you're a good player, and you're going to be a good player, but not if you do this. And I was like, oh, that was so much more effective than if he would have, what he would have done with me back in the day. It would have been a beat down. And you're like, oh God, I want to be a good player. Like, so I'm never going to do that again. Like, he wasn't shell shocked. It's just a really effective technique. I have never had a good player do this. And he's had a lot of good players, and Mason wanted to be one, and he was one. He's a great player. But I thought it was, sort of those communication techniques, and he's still really good at, he doesn't let anything go. Like when you're winning and riding a nice wave or whatever, he will rock the boat in 2 seconds if he thinks it's something that could be a problem later, or something that could, if that cropped up at the end of a game, like, no, we're handling this now. And his attention to detail on that is really good. And he's constantly talking to players, meeting with them, not to excess, but just making sure he's on top of things. And I think it shows sort of the time he spends. There are a bunch of guys like that. It's not just him. Tom Izzo does an amazing job with that. The amount of time he spends with those guys off the floor really pays off. And how engaged he is in their everyday lives, so that he can tell when something's bothering them, when it's not, something off the floor is affecting their on floor. I think that's really important for the players. Is, it's just not enough to evaluate what you get in those 2 hours. You got to be engaged in their whole life at this stage, so that you can be on top of it, help them, and so you can notice the little things before they become big things.
Thank you. That's great. And Coach K is very innovative. I mean, he's always out ahead of the game in regards to acting and changing. So I just, like, if he can get better, we all can get better.
Yeah, he puts a lot of time into it and thinks about things a lot. And, he thinks about delivering messages differently, and still does creative stuff with meetings and the time he's going to bring them back, and the story, the way he's going to convey a story to them, or make a point. He's not bored by it. Like, it's not like he's going to do the same thing every year with his team. I think he looks at every year as being completely different, and I think he's energized by the newness of each year, which is kind of cool.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
All right, Jay, we're going to be respective of your time. We got a couple more questions here, probably 2 more questions, if you don't mind. Sean, next question, Sean.
Hi, Jay. This is Sean J. Chandran. I'm the founder of Crossover Basketball and Scholars Academy, the nonprofit that works in India using basketball to impact gender equality in education. I also had a chance to meet you when you were speaking at Harvard with Coach Amaker, and I got to coach your nephew there at the camp, which was pretty cool. And but I got to hear you speak, and it was fantastic. I'm going to kind of go all the way back to the beginning. My daughter's 9, and she missed her first AAU season this spring with everything going on. So I just witnessed her get her first jersey with the 5-star NBPA sending her a package, and that joy on her face, right? She opens this box, and there's this clean new champion jersey given to her from 5-star. And as you were speaking about going back and reflecting, when we're thinking about these young people, like especially when they're hitting high school, starting college, what are some prompts and methods? I'm big on having players reflect. How do we get them, or what are some prompts that you've seen that really help them stop and take notice and go back to that moment, right? Like that, hey, let's sit down and write for a few minutes, or do a video blog or something that captures that moment. But you have some prompts that help them, or words that help trigger that memory, that take them back to those memories of why this is special and how cool this moment is.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I had a similar thing with my son when he was playing. He got invited. I don't know whether he got invited because he could play or because we could pay, but got invited to this. It's called the Phenom. Got invited to the Phenom camp out in California. So I grew up out there. So we thought, let's take him out there. And he wasn't all that old, but he goes out there. They give him all this gear, and he's got this jersey, really cool jersey that he got, all these uniforms. And so when he got back, I took the uniform and had it framed for him. And he still got it in his room. And it was just something that I thought, he's seen me play, or seen the fact that I played. And then, I got like a framed jersey from when I played. And I thought, he should have that. And we'll keep it in perspective and everything, but it was kind of neat. And so we did that. And then my wife asked me to coach his AAU team when he got to high school, because she didn't really care for the way some of the coaches kind of treated the players. She said, isn't this supposed to be fun? Like, why do they have to scream at him all the time? And kid makes a mistake, and the coach is all demonstrative about, get him out of there. She's like, I'm sick of that. She goes, so you're coaching the team now. So I worked with a buddy of mine named John Searby, who many of you may know, who used to be an assistant to Jeff Lebo at Auburn, Tennessee Tech, and great guy. So we kind of sat down and said, what do we want this to be? How do we want to handle this? And so we decided we were going to make it as positive an experience as we can for the players. We're going to have high standards and everything, but we decided we're not going to say a word to an official, not one. And so as coach, we didn't say one word to an official 2 straight years. And then we wanted them to make sure that when we were on the road, that like in my experience playing when I was younger, playing travel ball, the things that were really important to me was the stuff we got to do as teammates. Like when our coaches would drop us off at the movies, or when we'd eat, or the time in the hotel. And so we tried to make that memorable for them. So we made sure we set up meals. We talked to them about making sure they sat with somebody different. And then we kept the parents away from it as much as we could, and made sure that was a sanctuary for them, and that the experience was good. And win, lose, whatever. We met right after the game. We evaluated things, and then we said, all right, next play. And we moved on, and then made sure that they had a good time. And I always made sure, like, with some of the players, like we had players that didn't play as much. And when you'd put them into the game, if they were tentative, the way I would get on a player, like one of our bench players, there's a kid named Gray on our team. And I said, hey, Gray, if you pass up another shot, you were wide open, shoot it. If you pass up another shot, I'm taking you out. Stuff like that. Not like jerk them around on other stuff, but, like instill a little confidence in them. It's AAU. So you want it to be a good experience for them. So that's what we tried to do, and what I tried to do with my boy. And when guys had really good games, like maybe a kid that didn't play much had like 6 or 8 points, you made a big deal out of it with the other players to make sure that, hey, we won this game because of this guy. And or if they dove on the floor for a loose ball or whatever, you praised the action you wanted repeated, and you made points with your better players with the actions of your lesser players. And we had, that team, we had Grant Williams, who's playing for the Celtics now. We had Daniel Jones, who's the quarterback of the New York Giants. Those guys were on that team, and it was a really fun experience. I mean, the players all got along great. And, we had to make sure the parents. I had one thing with the parents, like we lost a game or something. One of the parents came up and said, we really got to get these kids, they got to understand how important this is. They got to do this, do that. And I said, you know what? I know what we can do. Let's get some of our film when we were their age and show them how we never took a play off. Like, that was their third game today. Like, it's okay. like we never took a play off. Like, come on, man, relax.
Next question, David Bentley.
Hey, Jay, good to see you again.
Hey, David.
Hey, just wanted to, you kind of touched on your last two questions with Coach Skeeters, and the last one was, I want to hear you talk about the dynamic between, everyone says, as coaches, we always say, oh, kids are softer, kids aren't as tough these days. And then you kind of hear Coach, Frank Martin comes out and says, it's not the kids that have changed, we've changed. So I just want to hear you talk about like the whole dynamic between, because you obviously see a lot of basketball, just the dynamic between, the kids changing, but also the coaches.
Well, I mean, look, I think society has changed, and it's a question of what is acceptable. At least that's the way I view it. And so, let me frame it this way. So Bo Ryan, I was a big fan of Bo's when he was at Wisconsin. I got to know him, and I always really admired how his teams could play without turning the ball over. And I went to so many of his practices, and I felt like they don't do any ball handling drills or passing drills that look so innovative that indicates that they wouldn't turn the ball over. And so I asked him about it one time. I said, what is it? What do you do that makes your teams so good with the ball that your turnover rate is so low? And he said, one thing I've learned about coaching, it is not what you say, it is what you accept. And we don't accept turnovers. It's not what you say, it's what you accept. And man, I really thought about that with myself as a parent. Like, you know how it is as a parent, we say a lot of stuff, but what did I accept as a parent? And I'm sure that resonates with all of you as coaches. And to me, like Frank and I have talked about this, actually, I differ with him on this. Society's different now. When I was a player, if you didn't make a play, you got called some misogynistic name, or coach might have called you a name that would be homophobic, whatever. That wasn't acceptable then, but you could get away with it. It's unacceptable now. And so now if a player, I think you mentioned the word soft, those are all descriptive terms about a player that didn't accomplish a task the way you wanted it accomplished. And so to me, it's about adapting to what's the best way to get the player to understand what they're capable of and what they need to do. And I've been around coaches that scream at everything. I've been around coaches that never raise their voice. And I shouldn't say never raise their voice, but you go to watch Lon Kruger run a practice. First of all, every one of Lon Kruger's practices are open. Every single one of them. If the opposing coach wants to come, they're open. He doesn't care. He's like, that's not going to win or lose us any games. And he's like, if I have to close a practice to be able to act, the way I want to act, then I shouldn't be doing that. And so my thing is, how would you behave if all your practices were open? I think it should be the same. I don't think it should differ. But the players, when we say the players are soft, or the players aren't as tough as they used to be, or they're different than they used to be, what are we really trying to say? That we can't get them to do what we want them to do? We can't, that's on us. Do we expect them to be ready-made like Green Berets when they get there? What do we want them to do? If you value taking charges, they'll take charges. If you value rebounding, they will rebound. It's really your team. You are what you emphasize. You are what you emphasize in the way you play. You are what you emphasize in the way your team behaves and you are what you emphasize and the way your team relates to one another. I don't think that's changed at all. Like methods may have changed, and they should, because a lot of the stuff that went on when I was a kid and when I was in high school was wrong. It was fundamentally wrong, and at times morally wrong. That doesn't mean anybody's a bad person, but things have changed and they're better now. And so I don't think that should be reflective of the players. You know, the players now are doing more than they ever did. Like they're way better than we were. They're way better. And I can tell you, like, and that's my point about coaches being expert complainers. When I played in high school, we were criticized by our coaches because we played too much pickup ball. Our coaches used to complain, like, you guys are just in the gym all night playing pickup, not working on your skills. You're playing pickup, and you're out on the playground playing pickup ball. And now what do guys say? The coaches say, these guys don't even play pickup ball anymore. They don't even know how to compete. They don't know what game point is. They don't know how to compete. Well, what is it? Which is it? Do we have to play some pickup ball, or, you know, things have changed, and we need to adapt to what's the best way to get the players to do what we think is important, and to do it right. That's really all it is. What do you value, and what do you want? You know, what do you want to be, and then how do you teach your players that this is the way to do it? I don't think that's changed. It's just the methods have changed, and what's acceptable has changed, and what's acceptable should have changed.
Thank you.
All right, next question. 712.
Thank you very much. How you doing, Mr. Jay? How you feeling tonight, man? I appreciate you coming on. It's great to see you again.
I'm feeling
great. You know.
Hey Jay, Jay, 712 stands for Tyson Wheeler is the all-time leading assist leader at the University of Rhode Island. 712 assists.
Should have been 800. Guys were open when he shot it.
Could have been more if I didn't shoot so much.
Often.
Oh man. Hey Jay, I appreciate everything you've done for me in my career and helped me out. You know, I used to love listening to you speak about our team when I was watching the film. You've done a great job, and I'm happy for your success, especially starting off in Atlantic 10. My question for you is, what are some ideas to help build confidence in some of our players that don't have confidence in having a voice? And I'm not talking about, you know, in today's society. I'm talking about within our team. You know, we struggle sometimes, especially with freshmen that don't want to communicate. They're very silent. They're probably getting used to the whole system. But we also have older guys. You know, you're very good at speaking. You're not shy about getting in front of people. Do you have any ideas or suggestions to help them out that I can give them?
Yeah, Tyson, I think there are a couple things I would say. One is, can you put them in positions where they have to speak, and maybe they have to lead a discussion, or they have to they have to stand up in front of the team and give some kind of report, or maybe have them do a scouting report of your team, or evaluate something, or run some sort of film session for you. You know, this is obviously preseason or summer or something like that. You can't do all this stuff when you're in the middle of it. But just get them used to talking, and, you know, put them in situations where they have to. I can't remember who said this one time, that Phil Jackson used to run practices where he wouldn't allow the players to talk, and they're running into each other, no screens, you're getting called out, guys have a chance of getting hurt, you know, stuff like that, just to make the point that, okay, well, if you're not allowed to talk, then you know, that's a problem. So just to emphasize, you know, their ability to do it. And then on the confidence side, like Coach K used to talk about, he used to tell us that, you know, if you're not talking, it's a selfish act. You know, that it means you're thinking, you're into yourself, and you're thinking only about yourself, instead of being throwing yourself into what the team is doing. And so he used to do it that way, that it made it sort of a team responsibility to talk. And I always thought that was really important. But I would say, just any chance you have to put them in a position where they have to talk and there's no choice involved, and to where they even if they're really scared at first, like I always remember like the first times I had to do public speaking things when I was younger, that it was difficult. But after you did it a few times and failed or whatever, you got the hang of it, and you certainly got better at it. And I know we were joking around about kind of when I got started, being able to watch your teams play, because you guys were legit, man. I mean, you were so good. But one of the things I've always thought about that, and I think the same goes for coaching, playing, whatever, is I always really thought about some of the games that I did back then, not yours, but I had games back then where that might be the only time that team was on television, because even TV was different back then. Not all the games were on TV, and so I always thought about what did I want to leave that player with and that player's family? What kind of product did I want for them if that was going to be their only game that year that was on ESPN? And so I really thought about that, prepared that way, that I wanted to give them my best. I didn't want to make a mistake. And I wanted to be able to say what I thought about things and make sure I conveyed everything that was important. I think it's the same with your team. Like, you think that a player on your team, isn't really helping you right now. Well, it doesn't mean they're not going to help you later on in the season. They're not going to help you next year, whatever it is. So you kind of constantly, giving your best to them. And I think if you give your best to each one of your players and your assistants and your staff, if you're mindful of that, you'll get their best back. I mean, I really believe that. Like, I think players want to please their coaching staff. And especially when the coaching staff, when the players know, it's I don't want to make it sound like that old line about, knowing that you care thing. But I do think when they know you're invested in them, into making them better, and you are, but when they know that, they'll give it back. I really believe that. And but if they don't, then there may be times you got to jet somebody. That happens. But it's not going to be because of you. It's going to be because of them, and your other players will see that too.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
You too.
Jay, final question of the night goes to Steve Turner.
Jay, Steve Turner from Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C. First, I want to say thank you for what you've done for us tonight and the time that you've given to us. Also, thank you for what you've done in terms of pouring into this game that we all love and the contributions you continue to make our game great. Like, I can't say thank you enough. My question for you is, we've been sitting in this pandemic. We've been battling with the social justice. As we're getting back to being with our players and having an opportunity to hopefully get back on the court and do the things that we love with building these guys up and giving them opportunities, what are some things that you would say to us as coaches of these young men and women that we really need to be focused on? Like, my biggest fear is that these kids are going to come out of here with all that we've been sitting in with mental health issues. What are some things that you would say, recommend to us as coaches, be mindful of and give to your kids?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying what you did. I don't look at myself as, I'm just like you, trying to do the best I can every day, because I've taken way more from the game than I've given. I know that. And but on your question about how to deal with players in the pandemic, that's a profound question and profoundly important. And I would say two things on it. Number one, if I had a team right now of young people, one of the things I would do is show them historically in different ways what people have gone through before them. So I've told this story on the air a couple times. My grandmother, my mother's mother, came to the United States from Scotland, and she came over on the Queen Mary. She was in the third class cabin, kind of a Leonardo DiCaprio trip over, and when I was a kid, she used to use a tea bag over and over again until it wouldn't even color the water before she'd use a new one. And I used to tease her about that. That, come on, Grandma, we can afford a tea bag each time you make a cup of tea. And I didn't realize when I was a kid that she had lived through the 1918 pandemic. She lived through World War I. She lived through the Great Depression. She lived through World War II. And when I was a kid, she was living through Vietnam. And like, we're going through a tough spot here. It's not good. But I don't think it's as bad as 1918. I don't think it's as bad as the Great Depression. I don't think it's as bad as World War II. We'll handle it. And so like when I was younger, my kids were younger. We took a trip over to Europe, and we went through to Normandy, and we were looking at all this stuff. And my kid was 17 at the time, and I was telling them, the guys who ran up this beach were 1 year older than you. And we went through all these cemeteries, and you started look at the age of these soldiers that died here. They were your age. And, what he was going through wasn't all that tough. He never had to run up a beach with machine gun fire, didn't have to jump out of a plane with a parachute. This is hard, but people have done harder. And so, keeping that in perspective. And then the other thing is, that's part of the duty of being a teammate, is to check in on one another and put that responsibility on your team too. Like, you're keeping track of it as the leader, but your team, make sure that they're looking after one another and checking in on one another. And, sort of if you see something, say something. So I think your players now are probably more in tune with than we were about mental health issues. And even though it is still, there's still maybe a feeling of stigma that goes with it, or maybe embarrassment, whatever. That's not as bad as it used to be. So they're a little bit more open to that. But as best you can, letting them know that there is nothing wrong with needing some help. Zero. Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan and most recently Paul George have been, I think, very courageous in stepping out and using the platform to point this up and underscore how important it is. But especially now, a lot can slip through the cracks because you're not having eye-to-eye contact, and that's really difficult. So it means that your team's going to have to kind of pull together from remote and make sure they're keeping in touch with one another and monitoring each other, and don't feel bad to let somebody know that, hey, I think so-and-so may be struggling a little bit, so that you stay on top of it. Because that's what families do. That's what friends do. That's what teammates do. So like two-pronged, like, we can handle this and we will, and because our predecessors have been through much worse. And then we're going to get through it together. Like that's where a feeling of togetherness, I think, can be really, really important and really helpful.
Thank you, Coach.
Excuse me. Only thing that I would add to that, Steve, is allowing our players to understand that vulnerability is a sign of strength. Too oftentimes people equate vulnerability with a sign of weakness. So I think if we can, as often as we can continue to articulate that vulnerability as a sign of strength, and that even you as their leader, you're vulnerable at times, and so if they can look at you and say, hey, Coach goes through some tough times too, but he's bounced back and he's persevered. So I think if we can continue to just, allow them to have that opportunity to say, I'm vulnerable right now, and I'm not as comfortable as I want to be right now, and then you hear what they're saying, then they're going to be much more open and receptive to, go through those feelings and to share those emotions. So again, allowing vulnerability to be a sign of strength, versus, a sign of weakness. Jay, I want to say to you, Jay, we always give our presenters the final words, and you have been on, and your time has been invaluable. We want to respect that. But if you have any parting words that you would like to say at this point, we want to open it up to you. And you've already said a tremendous amount, tonight. And then I will bring the close to our Living Trophies Master Zoom class.
Well, all I would say is how much I admire all of you and what you're doing every day, because I mean that. Like, being a coach is a noble profession, and I've always felt that way, and I couldn't have more respect for you and what you're doing, and admiration. And I'll just say again, like, anytime I can be of any service, you've got my number. Feel free to ring it up if I can help in any way, large or small.
With that being said, Jay, we can't thank you enough for coming on here tonight. I texted you earlier today and I said, hey, a lot's going on. And you said, hey, Kev, yes, there is a lot going on, but I will be there tonight. And you have been. You've not only been here tonight, but you have stayed longer than any other presenters that we've had, and we've had some outstanding presenters. And tonight we broke our record for the most number of participants. So Jay, you've broken 2 records here tonight. You outdone Tommy Amaker, believe it or not. Tommy Amaker was one of the first ones on our Zoom, and he did a tremendous job. And you know that he's my first cousin, so I'm really, really close to him. That's when I first had the opportunity to meet you. So in closing, to our Living Trophy Master Zoom class participants and members, I'm very honored and thankful that you take out the time and make the time to come out every Thursday to be a part of this Zoom class, which I affectionately call a Master Zoom class. And I'm really honored to be able to reach out and bring presenters like Jay Bilas that will take out the time to pour into us, because what we try to do, Jay, here at Living Trophies is we try to be the ladle. We want to be ladles that positively pour into the buckets of the young men and the people that we love and we serve. And our job and our attempt is to create as many living trophies as we possibly can. And early on in this, your presentation, you said something about legacy. And you said, you're not really interested in what your legacy is. But I think a great definition of legacy is not what you leave for people, is what you leave in people. And tonight you left something in us that tomorrow when we get with our players, whether it be in person or not in person, they will be better because we got better tonight. So I can't thank you enough, and I can't thank everybody for coming on tonight and being who you are. I told Jay that you were a great group of people, and I told Jay that you were professionals, and I told Jay that you were smart and that you were caring, and you are always those. That's who you are, and I am really honored that we are a community that we can get together. And Jay, you're welcome back anytime. You can come sit in, or if you have something to say, just raise your hand, and we'll allow you the opportunity to share with us.
I'll take you up on that. Thanks for having me. Happy to cure insomnia for you.
Well, we thank everybody here. Appreciate you, and everybody continue to stay blessed and stay safe. Keep vigilant in your attempts to improve. Keep striving, keep serving, keep sharing, and keep soaring. Take care. Thanks, Jay.
Coach Sutton.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, guys.
Be blessed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Coach Sutton.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Be safe.
All right, Lamont, stay up, man.